All right. Thank you all for making it back from lunch. Hope you enjoyed the sunshine and all of the great food. And thank you, Cam, for the introduction. You definitely set the stage well, so we can just hop right into the content because we have a lot to get into today. So as Cam mentioned, my name is Hannah Nilsson, and I work here at Tune in the product marketing department. And I'm here with Marie Langhout-Franklin, who is the head of partner marketing at eBay, and John Clayton, the CEO of Streamline, a performance marketing agency, Matt Wool, the president of Acceleration Partners, another performance marketing agency, and then Lindsay Vreeland, who is the global online partner marketing manager at Microsoft. So we're going to kick things off by just setting the stage evenly for everyone here and put out some definitions. And Matt is going to kick us off here by defining what is an ad partnership and what is a private and what is a public network program.
Do you want my fun fact, by the way?
Oh, you could do your fun fact first. That'd be good.
My fun fact is I once asked Justin Timberlake who he was. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And also, Marina, if you're here, please put away your phone. I don't know if So I'll start, I guess, with what we consider an advertising partnership to be. I guess that's the first question. So for us, we don't think of partnerships as a specific channel. We really think of it as a way to pay a partner. And that partner can be in any variety of what you consider channels. It can be business development, it can be mobile publishers and networks, it can be affiliate, it can be any of those. But for us, what matters is that the relationship has 4 specific elements. There's payment generally that is based on performance, typically tied to some kind of specific action or measurable. There's a transparent relationship. Both partners know exactly what is happening at all times. It's an ongoing relationship where it's not just a single transaction. You're actually having an ongoing relationship happening. And lastly, that it's tracked in some kind of way, usually with technology, that helps facilitate all the other elements. So that's really what we consider advertising or performance partnerships. And again, it can kind of be across a variety of channels. It's just a way to pay a partner and facilitate a relationship.
Yeah, does Lindsay and...
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't think that we kind of look at it as in a channel. I don't think that it's necessarily this one-all be-all of what exactly a partner is. For us, we do measure things to specific guidelines. So we work on a CPA, but we have specific ROAS targets that we're hitting based on categories, based on the margins. So for us, there is that piece that we need to consider. In an ideal world, I would love to get to a place where we're really working with partnerships in all areas of the funnel with different KPIs for each of them. But for right now, that's kind of how we're measuring things.
Yeah, I can add to that. At eBay, and my fun fact, just to introduce it, is that I grew up next to a nudist colony. I was not in the nudist colony. I grew up next door to the nudist colony. So at eBay, we're in a pretty interesting position as a really mature retail brand in the e-commerce space. And when we think about partnerships, we've actually just gone through a bit of a transformation within our business, moving from, I like what you said about affiliate. Like, affiliate is just a way to pay people. Partnership is the actual nature of the relationship. And I think back to what Peter was saying yesterday in his opening keynote about how there are certain things that will be automated and make sense to automate, and then certain things that truly do need to be human, and partnerships, it very much for us is that. And how we manage that at scale happens through our team, but it's also across the entire business. So we think of PR as an extension of a partnership arm. We think of regional marketing as an additional extension of that arm. And I think later on in our discussion, we'll talk about the operational challenges that come with that. But for us, yes, it's a CPA channel, but it's also the off-site expression of our brand. And so it's incredibly meaningful to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting that you were talking about measuring PR as more of one of those performance-based relationships. What led you to being able to do that?
Yeah, so actually it was interesting. Influencer became a really big catalyst for us in doing that. Of course, as a traditional performance marketer, my concern is always inefficiency of spend, and not to say that PR dollars are inefficiently spent, but they're certainly not tracked the same way. And so influencer became a really great forcing catalyst for us to start thinking about other ways to extend the idea of a talking head and actually manage it and produce results in a meaningful way from that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we talked a lot in our prep calls and at lunch about just that decision-making point of there's all of these different partnerships out there, there's all these different ad platforms, and Lindsay, you had some really good things to say about those moments that really led you guys to bring everything in-house. Would you mind sharing some of those stories?
Yeah, I think, as I like to say, I think that there's kind of three things or three issues, challenges that we're solving for. And, they break them down into operational efficiencies. So when we think about how large our program is and the reach that it has, all of those kind of efficiencies that happen when we just can work with one platform versus many platforms. And then from a global reach perspective, consolidating and working with one that's private, that's the Microsoft affiliate network, allows us that global reach. And then the third one is just really thinking about the type of partnerships that we can work with and the limits that we have sometimes when we're working with a network per se versus coming direct to Microsoft. Those non-traditionals where we can tell them, hey, be a part of the Microsoft program. We can speak the Microsoft language to them and not telling them to kind of go jump through a million hoops to come directly to us.
So it's not just that cost model that is important, it's all the more intangible.
I think, and I think the cost model is important. I would say that it's not as much of a priority for us as it is when we think about efficiencies and scale.
And if I could just jump in there, I think the cost model and the cost savings model was probably one of the primary drivers initially to entice a lot of brands to look at SaaS solutions or alternatives to networks. I really don't think it's the case at this point. It's technology, it's the efficiencies that are gained. Price really doesn't have as much of an effect, I would say, for most brands' decisions.
Well, one thing I would say on that, though, is that where it has an effect is the model of paying the network on a percentage of what's happening, spend or revenue, versus a flat fee. Because if you're paying as a percentage of spend, if you have business development partners that you want to track through the platform, you're never going to just start forking over a percentage of that, because that network didn't really do a lot for you to acquire that partner. But if it's a SaaS model or a different type of model, there's no reason not to then centralize all those relationships.
Sure. Yep.
But in terms of the number of dollars, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us it's about, I think, depth rather than breadth. And so it's less about expanding partnerships at scale. That was, in fact, a strategy that we really lived into in a big way a few years ago. And now it's more about how can we go deeper with the existing partners that we work with. So for us, that's the primary driver.
What are some of the challenges involved with kind of tweaking that strategy and going really deep, but also having it all in-house and owning everything from start to finish yourself?
Yeah, I can take that for sure. So with a business as big as eBay, there's two big challenges, right? I would say the first is really about accountability to spend. And within the second is operations, but the first creates an operational problem, right? So the first for us around just performance and accountability of spend and efficiency is something we have to manage very, very closely. It's a core element of our business. And when we think about being able to go back to a region who wants to spend a certain amount of dollars in a quarter and do that through a bunch of different types of channels, paid search, paid social, display. They have a lot of ways that they can spend that money. For us, we can bring to the table a mature tracking and accountability to that spend that's really meaningful. The challenge then with that becomes operational. And as I mentioned before, influencers are a great example of that. We have a really great benefit of managing everything for the most part in-house, in the sense that we can express our brand the way we want to express our brand, and it creates a very straightforward story for that. The challenge, I think, is we're a huge company. eBay's massive, and efficiency of marketing dollars is a hot topic across virtually every cell of our business, and so there's just a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, we have the exact same issue too, Marie, and I think it's just, I don't know, it's probably just a large company people breeding people issue, and it's just that too, that we're so large, there's lots of pools of money everywhere, and people may be wanting to invest in affiliate, but how do we separate that out and meet their KPIs? So I think it's just more internal operational issues that we're struggling with as well.
And I think a lot of brands struggle with the actual management of a program were they to take it in-house. The reality is affiliate is not a channel that can be run programmatically, right? Unfortunately, it's a people-based business. You need bodies to do it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's fortunate for Matt and myself, since we happen to be agencies that serve that.
Margins are better not to be people.
Yes. But it's very challenging to build a large enough team in-house to manage a program effectively if you're a large business. Now, eBay, Microsoft happen to have those resources, and they're able to actually do that. I would say for most brands, it's actually very, very challenging. And along with that, there aren't a lot of agencies that actually do the type of work and do it well to be able to support this. Affiliate is a really nuanced industry. I think I could throw a rock from here and hit 20 paid search marketers, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to find too many people that really know affiliate very well, and so it's hard to grow those teams and scale it. So that's one of the biggest challenges. Traditionally, you had networks that were managing everything for you. You had a full support system in place. When you take it in-house, you need the people that know what they're doing, and it's tough to find them.
So then do you see yourself and Matt, your team, do you guys see yourselves taking more of that strategic role, or is there still a lot of the tactical tasks that you're
It's both, because these programs have a lot of strategic stuff that needs to happen, but there's also just a lot of heavy lifting. There's just so much, people who work in other parts of marketing they think it's easy stuff, but there's so many little things that need to happen all the time, and it's just a heavy lift. But I think, strategically, what I was going to say to Lindsay's point about different pots of money, what's been interesting for us is that some of our clients are starting to say, okay, we've got all these different pots of money and different KPIs and different things. Shouldn't we be moving towards a world where kind of there's one price, if you will, for a user or customer or transaction, and almost it doesn't matter where it's coming from, as long as you can get it for that price, that kind of you're happy to do that. And so some of our clients are taking that lens and then applying a different strategy, which is, well, then let's start kind of consolidating all of it, because ultimately there shouldn't necessarily be different KPIs for everyone, right? Really, if you're partnering with all these different people out there that are helping you make money, should you really be looking at them through different lenses and with all kinds of different KPIs, or should we just be trying to consolidate it and track it and manage it in a more centralized fashion? So that's been kind of an interesting evolution, and obviously with very large companies, it's a lot harder to do, but I think that's kind of the world that people would prefer to live in. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would love to have you come and talk to be in a meeting for me. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can add something there too. Internally, we're constantly, I think affiliate and partnerships is inherently so bottom funnel. And we tend to have to actively as a team internally try to break the mindset of, we're not going to, partnerships is not upper funnel, it's not consideration, when in fact it is. We work with really large commerce partners or content partners that have commerce capability, and we have technology that supports that, things like offsite checkout. And we have a team in the room that help build that and commercialize it. It's a really important initiative for us. That is both inherently top and bottom funnel. And so, and then who sits in the middle, right? What's loyalty, what's deals? And so for us, a lot of it is just working internally, I think, to communicate that. And that becomes difficult because it's such a culture, sort of it's inherent in our culture at a company of this size and of this age, so that a third party couldn't necessarily come in as easily and navigate that conversation. So I can see definitely both sides of the coin. I think for us, so much of why we approach this topic the way we approach it internally has so much to do with that, the nuance that's unique to us.
And how do you go about getting all of your internal stakeholders really bought into, especially the newer testing like PR partnerships? And
If I could answer that really articulately, I might not have a job. That's so much of what I do, and the rest of the team we work on. A lot of it's relationship building internally. At the end of the day, we're a business that is super focused on results and failing fast and fast outcomes. We are in a hyper-competitive retail environment right now. Prime Week was last week. We brought a lot of good stuff to the table for that and competed in a really real way as a partnerships channel. So I think it's leading with that data and talking about efficiency of that dollar spent. So again, it becomes about cross-channel. The regions are asking, and regional leadership and PR, if I'm going to take $1, do I give it to paid search or do I give it to partnerships? And we have answers depending on what the objective is. So it's really leading with, I think, outcomes first.
Yeah, and proving out that incremental value of your
That's
channels.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lindsay, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, we're the same exact approach. We're constantly taking a test and learn, and I'd say that it's internally, I probably spend 50% of my time just with this internal education, not only of what our program is, but what we can do, and just educating on, the full funnel model that we have and why we shouldn't be seen as another channel compared to SEM and display. And so how we can utilize and move those dollars around, and then also really talking about incrementality and what that means and what we're doing to try to measure that and drive incremental revenue rather than just have this last click, the cost that we're associating with every sale.
And John and Matt, I imagine a lot of your time is also spent educating and...
Yeah, I think that we probably spend, in every single client engagement that we go into, it's a bit of an education process for the, executive teams we might be working with. Unfortunately, the performance channel, affiliate channel, whatever you want to call it, really has a bad rap amongst most marketing executives, and probably for legitimately good reasons, I would say in a lot of cases. The interesting thing that we start to find once we really dive into the data is that the perceptions around certain partners or certain channels really don't hold a lot of truth in a lot of cases. Some of these loyalty and coupon sites that everyone just loves to vilify and really just doesn't see value in them, when we actually start looking at the data, we see that they actually are driving massive amounts of upper funnel engagement. They're introducing consumers to brands. They're providing a huge amount of value that people just wrote off without really ever looking at anything. And so a big part of our battle in working with any brand and with any client is trying to advocate for the channel. The great thing is that we have enough data at this point to actually prove that. And historically, it was just kind of guessing. Now we can actually point to figures, and that's really helpful.
I think that's a challenging piece too, because we have that data now and we're working on, now I'm kind of at this point of what do I do with this data and how do I make action to it and how do we change the old school model of what we've always been doing and how does that scale as well. So I'm kind of at that pivotal moment of, great, I have all this great data and now I have this unique technology versus a network that I can actually use that data and put action to it, but how do I go about doing that?
And it's challenging too, because I think when you go from a legacy network or a model that you historically had to one of these new systems, a SaaS-based platform, it's kind of like a fire hose, right? There's just so much data that comes along with that. And interpreting that, visualizing it, and making actionable decisions from that is really difficult for brands to do. So one of the things that we've done, and I think Matt's done at his agency, we've developed sort of analytics platforms that help us understand value from partners and help us look at things and really make smart decisions with that data.
John, what are some of those metrics that you guys are showing that really resonate with the brands where they're like, oh, okay, I get it, this makes sense?
Yeah, so new customers, right? Everyone's always trying to drive new customers. So there's a lot of different levers that we can pull with partners to essentially target customers that have not shopped at a retailer or brand before. We look at lifetime value and how it differs with the partner channel versus maybe organic or paid search or whatever it may be. The standard KPIs, AOV, things of that nature. And also just from an attribution standpoint, right? Like this is something that historically had never really been looked at. The affiliate channel was just grouped as its own thing, right? An affiliate, if you look at affiliate by itself, from an attribution standpoint, it looks terrible, right? Generally it does, because they're closers. Most affiliates do that. But then when you actually dive into it on an individual affiliate level, as I mentioned before, some of these guys, we look at like Ebates, for example, right? They may have more last touch conversions than any other affiliate out there. They also happen to be 50% of most people's affiliate program. But the first touch conversions they have and the introductions they have, the people that they're actually driving to the store in the first place, actually is also the largest amount of first touch conversions for the entire channel. So being able to see that and measure it helps us make decisions with how we essentially work with those partners.
Well, and it's also that there are a lot of partners now working on this advertising partnership model that didn't work in that model previously because they only worked on different other kinds of remuneration models. So if you think about, a lot of what we call the mass media publishers, like Business Insider, or Wirecutter, any of those guys, right? They're all relatively new entrants to this field, but they have a totally different way of going about getting customers, and our clients are falling all over those kinds of publishers because they show up really well in attribution models, right? So as kind of the types of partners that are involved in this model are changing, I think a lot of the attribution issues are also changing because you're seeing new models coming in that didn't exist in this world, 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the content producers and these big media publications that really are diving headfirst into affiliate, it's actually very exciting for us. It's reinvigorating the channel. I think to a large degree, it's provided a lot more value for the types of folks that we can work with. So I agree with you. That's been a really big change for the industry.
Yeah, I'll add one thing too. Like it's really, really timely to talk about this for us as a business because we are in the second year of a massive brand platform shift. If any of you watch TV, you've probably seen eBay's new branding out in, hopefully, if our money's being spent right, you've seen it. And we are constantly asking ourselves the question of essentially many businesses have awareness problem. eBay has more of a perception problem than an awareness problem. People know what eBay is, but they're confused about what we are. And we have a bunch of new value features essentially in market around shipping and pricing that is really compelling and super competitive in the market right now. So the question becomes inherently, how do we talk about that in our marketing in a more meaningful way that really actually snaps heads back to eBay? And so there are constantly questions from the very top of the business into our inboxes about, hey, you guys are so bottom funnel, right? Like, what can we do around consideration? How do we look at our models around partner payments and figure out how to better weight this actual probably consideration that's happening, to your point, from a lot of these hybrid content publishers? Because it's very real, and in many ways, it's more material than a media banner running on one of those sites, right? Because you have the accountability.
Right. That's great. So, Lindsay, I know that you talked about data in general, just being like you've so much of it going on, and I think that's a very common thing across marketing in general, where you have all this data, you have all of the information, but how do you and your team go about humanizing that data and say, sometimes of course you need all of the information of all the tracking and what the actual results were, but how do you take that and say, sometimes it doesn't make sense to always just follow the data? Is that something your team?
Good question. I'd say it's both. I think right now, because there's so many partners that we work with, and we think about the reach that we have and what some of the goals might be as well. I think it kind of depends on what the goal is at the time. So, I think it's a balance of when do you dive deep into something and really need to understand the value of it and go look into the data, and when did we hit a KPI, if it's, for instance, like a brand awareness, or if we've had a big launch. We just had the Surface Go launch last week, and if there's a launch, then we really are just looking for exposure at this point. And so is it really about diving into the data and understanding, who actually bought, or is it really about just getting that reach and those views out there? So I think it's kind of depending on the goals, and then also depending on, just making kind of gut decisions and when you should dive deep and when you just need to kind of go with it and make a decision.
But it's also that in partnerships, that's different. It's like in Facebook or on Google, you can say, well, if I spend more, what happens? And if I spend less, what happens? And it's very clear kind of what the outcomes are going to be generally. Like, there's no way to know if we run an awesome new campaign with someone, like what the result is going to be. You can't like plug that into a machine and learn that. So I think the data and the optimization is very key. You have to be doing that. But I actually think a lot of brands don't pay enough attention to trying new stuff and like just take a little bit of budget and just constantly be trying new things. A guy at a conference I was at recently said that they who tries the most shit wins, and I actually like really believe that. I think a lot of brands get stuck in this thing of they're just looking at the existing data in order to make the decision. But you know, one of the great things with the partnership channels, there can be so much creativity. You can do so many awesome campaigns, you know, come up with all kinds of great things, and it's just not something you can plug into an algorithm and see what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we actually, this year, we just put into a new initiative where we have a Shark Tank. We coined it Shark Tank. So we test out, we have like a test and learn budget that we divide them up among the team, and they can bring just different models to the table, different partnerships that maybe are outside of our scope, since we are very ROAS driven. So these are things that might not hit those KPIs, but at least allows us to test and learn from them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And the interesting thing is you never really know how effective it's going to be until you actually test it, right? It's all hypothetical. And it may work, it may not work, but the cool thing is now we have the data to at least directionally tell us if it's working or not. I mean, I think we've gotten to a point now, at least from the way that we measure and the way that we look at our campaigns, to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And it's pretty easy to make that decision to move on. So testing frequently with a ton of different new options and these new partners is something I think all brands should be doing. A lot of folks run their partnership campaigns with the same 10 partners, and it's the same promotions, and they buy the same newsletters, and there's really not a lot of variance from that, where I think they're leaving a lot of money on the table by not exploring new initiatives.
Man, I totally agree. Like, this is really blasphemous to say, probably as a digital market, like dyed-in-the-wool digital marketer, but sometimes we need to look beyond data. Like, we get so, I was saying earlier, we get so, like, we stare at our belly buttons around, like, what's the next thing we're gonna do? And at the end of the day, when you're thinking about that true, like, blue ocean to get digital books on you guys, if you're thinking about true blue ocean and getting to like not the next best thing, but like 100 times the next best thing, you can't just sit and look at nuances in data. You have to actually figure out that breakthrough idea. And in leadership, we have to figure out a way to fund that. Like, we have to figure out a way to create space for teams to think creatively, whether that's through workshops or Kaizens or whatever you might need to do. We've got to stay committed to that breakthrough, because otherwise we're just going to sit there and keep staring at our belly buttons in the bottom of the funnel, right?
And keep the status quo going. Yep. So we're about out of time here. So I know, went quick. As a closing statement, I'd love if you could give the crowd here a bit of advice if they're considering taking their programs in-house. What would your biggest piece of advice be to them?
My biggest piece of advice, I think, is to understand, I think, all of the technologies that are out there, and understand the resources that you need as well to really evaluate what it takes to go through some sort of migration, and what are you looking to get out of it. So what are your objectives?
I'd say think holistically. You know, business development, affiliate, influencer, mobile, you're all trying to do the same thing. So don't think of it as different silos. I think that's really important.
I would say that if you haven't done it already, do it now or tomorrow, and call either myself or Matt to help you with that.
I would say, I think it's easy to start with a list of all the stuff that you should do, and I would say make sure that you've got a parallel list of the stuff you're not going to do.
That's great advice. All right, well, thank you all, and thank you guys. This was really great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.